Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sequence Practice. It's your bi-weekly event where we take a crack at looking at your cold emails, social, phone scripts, and sequences to try to help bring up the abysmal industry 1% response rate on cold outbound. So luckily today I'm joined by two excellent panelists, one being Rex from OpenSense and Scott Barker from Sales Hacker and Outreach. Do you guys want to say hello? Start, Rex.
Hey, yeah, good to be on here. I love talking about messaging. I was an English major in college, so this stuff is near and dear to my heart. And I've been a salesperson now turned marketer for quite a while. Love it.
Awesome. Welcome to, well, it's great to have you on here, Rex. Scott, you want to say hi?
What's up, everyone? Love this topic. I'm a total sales and marketing nerd, so anytime I can break down some messaging, it's always a lot of fun, and it's just coming from so much trial and error throughout my career. So I've made all the mistakes, and hopefully I can help you sidestep a few.
That's awesome. Thanks, Scott. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump into it now? So let's start so for anybody who's just joining us for the first time, the kind of the framework of the show is we take a look at one email at a time. Sometimes those emails are just sole prospecting emails by themselves, meant to be a sequence of one. And then others, we're reviewing multiple emails or messages within a sequence. So to start today, we're going to start with two prospecting emails from two different submitters. There we go.
And Jeff, do we have context on these at all? Did they send in context, or we're just diving in?
Yeah, so a little bit of context on this. So this is for a pharma company that's selling to kind of doctors. So these are lab doctors that are looking for new ways to kind of ramp up their research. And this is a cold email that gets roughly about 5% response rate on outbound. So just for a little bit of a context, this is a sales team that is typically operated in field sales. Obviously, due to the COVID pandemic and people having to work from home, they're kind of adjusting their strategy and focusing more on cold outreach emails. Nice. So as you can see, the subject line's in the right corner there. So Professor Smith discuss a new tool for chemistry research.
I'll dive in right away. Just the first thing that hits me, and I haven't even finished reading it, is the fact that we're starting with I'm blank. Like we're already the first sentence is already making it kind of about you. Mm-hmm. And I think that first line is so unbelievably important, because I can't remember the exact number, but something like 70% are read on mobile. So you can only see the first, couple words. So if the first couple words are I'm blank and I don't know blank, like I've never seen that name before, I immediately now know I don't know this person, so it's not a priority. Right. So that's the first one that kind of just jumps off for me.
Right.
I'll throw out, so there's one thing that I really liked was, and this ties into your point, Scott, is actually they mentioned specifically your lab's contributions to the fields of, and like name the fields in a pretty detailed way. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you started the very first sentence of the very first paragraph was your lab's contributions to the fields of these two things have been impactful. I just caught this article about it, or whatever, however you transition that. The idea of starting with your lab, like, oh, instantly I want to know what you have to say about my lab.
Right.
What are you going to tell me that you've observed about me? And so kind of switching that point of view, exactly what you're talking about, Scott, like take out the I, don't introduce yourself. Your name's in the signature. It's not that hard. We can figure that out. Start with you, which I think is a great, and the sentence from there on is so good. It's all about them. It seems very personal, very specific to their lab. And I think it's a great idea to intro it.
Yeah, a good point, Rex. And I'm going to kind of add to that a little bit is that what this sentence really shows is that you're very familiar. So the seller is very familiar with who Professor Smith is, what they do, how they contribute to the industry. And it shows that they have very deep domain knowledge into what Professor Smith cares about. So
Which
I
is
really like
awesome.
that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's just kind of wasted with that first line, right?
What would
I
you
think,
guys think about totally abandoning, like, so that first paragraph, let's say we kill the very first sentence and we kind of up that first paragraph and talk about them. What do you think about throwing out, and especially if you're going to do multi-step sequence, the very first thing, just a very short paragraph, like, hey, this has been really impactful, or like your contributions to this field have been really impactful. Would you be open to considering something that would help with name the problem? And like just drop the email there, no bullet points, no feature set, like literally just try and get them to respond. Like, is that something you guys are addressing, or is that an issue for the lab that you guys are working in right now? Like, almost just to start the conversation, instead of, it feels like you have to dump out the whole pitch here in this email, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
yeah, I got some thoughts there. I think what you're trying to do at this point is just simply elicit a response, right? That's what you're going for right now. So I think that way of doing it is a great way to do it. And I know Josh Braun talks a lot about, like, those one sentence kind of like emails, because the other thing, and don't get me wrong, this is a great email. I look back at other ones. This is a really strong email, particularly if you get rid of the first sentence. So I do want to preface that. But when I do look at it, which I get more people pitching me than but my brain automatically goes into the heuristic pattern of like, oh, this is a sales email, because I've seen that 3-bullet pattern on so many emails, and just this kind of structure makes my brain go, ooh, sales email. So I do think, Rex, there is a world that's for sure worth an A/B test.
Yeah, like worst case scenario, they don't respond until they go then look at your website and think like, okay, what are they trying to pitch me? And then they do a little self-discovery and they're like, hey, I don't think it's for me because of something specific, which you can combat with maybe, like, oh, this is why you should field a call on this.
Right.
Versus giving them everything up front and like, look, I'm just overwhelmed, frankly. Like, I'm probably just going to ignore this.
Yeah, well, and that actually speaks to it just on the bullets themselves. I mean, I see, at least 2 or 3 different emails that I could send based on the 3 bullet points that are here, making for a really solid, nice drip campaign sequence. So we could easily take this kind of drip approach or the bullets approach, crack it into 3 separate emails, and then have those as your different subjects of each email.
Yeah,
I like it. And your point, Rex, made me think of an interesting, like, the more you put in an email, the more outs someone actually has, right? Like, they, on one of these bullets, they could be great, and then there's their objection right there, and then in their head, oh, I don't need to talk to this person because I'm all good here. You kind of gave them everything, and so you're also giving them more doors to kind of scurry out of.
Right. No, that makes sense. There's one thing I noticed as well is that we do see a lot of I. So Rex, you kind of alluded to it at the beginning, but there's I. It's really all about me, and less about the actual person themselves.
Yeah, agreed. I think again, while like Scott, I think this is leagues ahead of the average email, right? We're still talking about if you're about 5%, you're still 5 times better than the average cold email, which is typically trash. I think there's still an opportunity, like, we sometimes like, oh, okay, bold the call to action so that their eye goes there, but there's no value in that call to action, so I wouldn't bold it. And then I would be happy to provide a demo. This is a personal thing. I don't tell prospects I'm going to demo them, give them a demo. I'll show you the tool. That's how normal human beings, non-salespeople speak. Hey, I'd love to see that. I'd love for you to demo me. That's not how they talk. So let's just get rid of the word demo. Don't ever say the word demo. Then we assume it's a 30-minute spiel where you just feature dump on me and I just have no interest in that, right? Like, that's an average salesperson phrase. Right. So, hey, I'd be happy to show you what that would do or how that would work for your lab given these specific criteria I know you guys might have. So I'd say dump the demo. Right.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it goes back to that. Scott mentioned on a previous sequence practice that you really want to talk in natural language. So like you said, Rex, don't come across as a salesperson, come across as a helpful person that could be very well your friend the way they're talking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's certain there's certain language that salespeople use, like demos, and I would be happy to provide a demo. It's like, of course you would. That's what your probably KPIs
Almost like
are
saying
on.
free demo. You should throw in free there and see how much that improves your click-through rate.
Yeah, cutting edge is another one. Cutting edge is like an infomercial term that we can't use. There's even like offerings. Don't have any of that. Have someone who is maybe not in sales review your email and be like, hey, is any of this coming across salesy? And I bet they can circle it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And last point I'll point on this, because it's in the similar vein, is knowing the context. I didn't give this advice right away because I bet selling to like pharma and like scientists appreciate this, but this does look pretty jargony to me. There's a lot of words that are specific. Like I look at desired parameters, product synthesis, and synthetic. I think it's okay in this environment. I just wanted to highlight the point that watch some of the kind of buzzwords and jargon that you use.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up a similar point. Like, I bet that 50% of this is very industry specific, very helpful, and 50% of this is how your company talks about this thing. So look in especially for science, like look in a published journal. Are they using all of these phrases or like half of these phrases? Like, are you saying like match your desired parameter sounds nice and sciencey, retrosynthetic pathways maybe is your company's term for it. I don't know, like look out for those, because you think, oh, I'm being very tailored, very focused, but also your own version of jargon will get slipped in there quite easily. Especially, this happens all the time with software, like SaaS companies, all the freaking time. You think that's how your buyer talks, but in reality, it's how your company talks about how your buyer talks. So just be cautious, like use the right industry language, but not just your specific company language.
Well, I like that, Rex. How your company talks about how your buyer talks. I like that. That's awesome. There's another thing that I'm going to point out that I really like before we move on to the next one is I like that even though the call to action, I mean, we don't really have much love for the call to action here, but I do like that we do put in a benefit for the customer. So like if we can, to use Rex words, show you this tool, you can assess its utility. I mean, I don't necessarily like the wording of it, but I like putting a benefit of I'm asking you for something so you can get this.
Yeah, and I'm okay with the assumption that like there might not be any utility. I kind of like that. The opportunity for you to determine yes or no. I'm not assuming that it's a guarantee.
Yeah.
Like, hey, show up and you'll be able to determine for yourself. It's a little assumptive. I'm cool with it. I like that idea.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So we have best practices. So what would you say? Give me one sec. So what would you say are 3 takeaways from this email?
I love Scott's of like, let's just cut out I. Let's get rid of all the I's, and especially to start, like think mobile preview.
Okay.
Yeah, mobile preview is huge. Just your first sentence is the headline in the New York Times, right? It can't be weak. You should be spending most of your time thinking about your first sentence.
Okay, perfect. And then what's one more thing, gentlemen?
I try short and sweet. Like I think we all agreed, like take that content, split it up, or just cut it out.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would A/B test this with a email that's like a third of that long and doesn't go through all the benefits, just maybe does like one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that said, any comments from the audience? Anybody have any questions or comments on the advice we provided?
And let me know if we missed anything. I'm sure we probably did. If you have any comments and things, tweaks we could do better, or things maybe you thought were fantastic. And want to reiterate, it was a darn good email.
It was.
Great starting.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's move on to our next email now. So this context is from a company actually out of South Africa who gives the opportunities of having local boutique retailers the ability to actually stock local brands. So it's an easy way for them to actually source and sell new local content or local products. So this email is a cold, again, one-step sequence to try to get stockists, they're called, I guess the people who run the retail stores, they want to book a demo with this customer or with this seller.
Okay, Jeff, I wish it just said the way you described it in the first 2 sentences. I wish that was the whole email. Like what you said was so clear. It's like, hey, it helps local boutique retailers carry local sourced items. It's like a little tiny ad, and it's like, would that be of interest to you? Boom. Like if I'm, a supplier, I'm interested because that was a very clear description. B2B wholesale marketplace, very buzzword, like it gets too far. And then when I saw the subject line, there's a little bit of a language barrier there, I think potentially, like will sell at, like let's use outreach. So local brands that will sell at outreach. I assume that means that outreach is the target of the selling motion, which is a little confusing visually, like if you think about that.
Right.
So I would say, man, just swap out whatever you just said, Jeff. Put that at the beginning of the email, put up the rest. You're good to go.
A nice one-liner with a question at the end, kind of thing.
It was a very clear value prop. I mean, I get how it works.
Right on.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing I'll add on top of that is I think you did a great job, and that should be like in the value prop. But you could also even take it a step further, and maybe the first sentence is trying to uncover the pain. So that's what you do. What would these stockists be? What's the pain they're feeling? Do you struggle sourcing, local products? Something as simple as that. And again, going to the mobile, if I see, do I struggle with sourcing products and I am having that pain or challenge, I'm going to open up and see what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that, Scott, just a little bit more context, is that the way that these companies used to source local products is that they'd go to farmer markets or trade shows. And so they would go on these buying trips to find things in person. And now that that's off the table, they are actually running into problems sourcing products because it's literally like a third of how they do their work.
Jeff, do you sell for this company?
I do
You're
not.
very good at this.
Meeting after meeting.
Yeah.
Jeff, you'd be a cold calling king at these people. Yeah, that's huge. Be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what has replaced your buying trips now that COVID has hit? Like, that's very specific, and that's probably on all of their minds, as long as you're targeting the right people.
Right.
Yeah. I think just because I was thinking about, like, how would I put this into outreach, right? Because, like, if I'm using a tool like outreach, I'm instantly thinking, where are all the customizations I can do? What are the fields that are going to make this feel more personalized? And I don't see anything about the locations. I don't see the number of locations. I don't see the actual physical locations. Like, hey, are you having trouble sourcing products from Indianapolis, right? Like Indianapolis-based retail or like, creators, whatever it is, like that one little thing that would put it over the edge to like, oh, this is for me, right? Like there's the question, and then tailoring that question to your specific location would be really cool. Or like, hey, I noticed you have locations like this one, this one, and this one. Instead of doing buying trips, how are you getting those locally sourced items? It's just, there's just a little bit of extra detail you can get from the data, plug it right into the email. It's going to feel more specific to them. And then you get that personalized email feel without having to do that ridiculous amount of personalization.
Yeah, that makes sense, Rex. I mean, when you're talking about a company that, like, the buyer is going to be a company that is local, that has an address, there's so many cool things you can do with location that are personalized, that don't take hours to do pre-call research.
Yeah.
Right. No, good point. Good point. So I'm noticing a trend with both of you that it seems like asking for 20 minutes to talk is almost like passé. It's almost just not something that people do as much anymore. And why is that? Why are you showing a bias towards removing that whole give me 20 minutes to talk?
Look, in a first email, if you're not planning to send any other emails and that's the only thing you want to get out of it is like the cream off the top, okay. But you're not going to start a lot of conversations. I think Scott's point on the last email is like, your goal is just to get a response. You want to have some starting point for a conversation. And over cold email, especially a very saturated channel like cold email, that's really hard. Every conversation you can earn is a foot in the door, even if it's a no and a reason for the no. Then like, let's go earn more of those rather than just really trying like, hey, 7% response rate is really good. Like I would be happy with a 7% response rate on the average cold email.
Yeah.
But that's not enough conversation, especially if like, hey, you're booking some meetings and you get this false flag like, yes, we're doing super well. We never need to adjust this email. But in reality, maybe it could have been much better. Maybe you're leaving some money on the table because this is a unique product in a marketplace that it sounds like could very much benefit from it. So maybe 7% is half of the potential here. So we think we're doing really well, and we're not actually capturing everything we could. So I would say like the 20 minutes is, if that's the only email you're going to send, sure. Like ask them very specifically, here's the thing I want from this interaction. I think there's a lot more you can gather from it.
Well, thanks, Rex. And there's one more thing that you mentioned in here that people have to remember as well. Is I get asked all the time, what should my open rate be? What should my response rate be? Right? And those are, and you probably do too, Rex. You probably do too, Scott. And what you just said was so important, though, is that 7% is better than normal. It's 7 times better than the industry average. But like you said, this is a very unique product in a unique place. And it could, who knows, this could get 30% with the right tweaks.
Yep.
Right. And you don't know the limit with this type of email until you really put in a lot of these best practices we're talking about into it to get it to a point where you're maximizing the effectiveness of the time that you're spending on cold outbound.
Yeah. Scott, I'd love to hear your take on that too.
Yeah, I think you did a great job summing up. Like the 20 minutes to talk, if you have, a small total addressable market, like Rex said, you're kind of going to be burning through it and just getting that like 0.01% who are like, oh, I had that problem today, the needle in the haystack. And you got to warm them up. You have to educate them. It's kind of like asking someone to marry you before you took them on the first date. It's too much too soon. And again, it depends on who you're selling into. But like if you're sending this to an executive, who has 20 minutes to talk to a stranger when you haven't illuminated a problem yet, really, for me, or educated me on a problem. So that's my 2 cents on that. I do want to reiterate something Rex said, which is huge. I talked about this last week in my newsletter, is you getting hyper creative with the way that you're using like dynamic fields can make, and there's this huge push towards personalization. Everyone's like, if you don't fully personalize, you're the worst person ever. But there's a way, trust me, if you're creative enough, you can create an automated email that no one's going to tell that it was automated, right? So Rex gave a great point of just adding location to this. So you could see where your prospect is. They're in Indianapolis. You can easily pull that field. You could probably even go a step further. If you wanted to do a little bit of homework up front, add a custom dynamic field in there, get a VA to go through all the companies and see what products they source, and just quickly put a custom field in there. $9 on Upwork to do that. Create a custom field in Outreach and then put that in. Are you having trouble sourcing insert product? That's going to be really, really powerful and get their attention.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think there's a creative way to take that to the next level too. Like I think the second email, or maybe the first email instead of this one, could be like in the subject line, name the specific item sourced locally ? And like that like, they're gonna recognize their own product type, and they're gonna say like, what do you mean sourced locally? Hey, are you currently sourcing these local? We have a marketplace where we can find those people for you, since you're no longer able to go on trips and find these yourselves. Plus it'll save you time even if you can. Like, man, like that's, Scott, you could take that to the next level. I love that idea of having somebody go search for the product itself.
Cool.
Yeah. Those little things that you just got to let your mind go there. And sometimes it seems like a lot of manual work up front. You got to think, if you're putting them through a 12-step sequence, you do that once up front and you have that, information forever. And again, utilizing VAs for some of these tasks can be really helpful. Even if you're an IC, it's worth it.
Yeah, I love that.
Awesome. So with that said, what do we think are 3 key takeaways for this particular email?
I'd say take advantage of dynamic fields if you have the luxury of it, which
which
Hopefully you have a sales engagement
find a way to
platform.
get the luxury of it because it's becoming table stakes.
Yeah.
Right? Like
There you go.
honestly,
Yeah.
it's not the days when everybody just signed up for that free trial of Yesware and went to town on it. Like we need the dynamic fields. If we're not going to personalize every single one and spend hours on it, we need those dynamic fields for sure.
Right. And what's another best practice that we can, or key takeaway from this one?
I
What
think
do we talk about? Can we quickly go back?
Yeah, if we think about the subject line was a real struggle for me. So like that was your first impression, right? Was local brands that will sell at. And I recognize that like maybe that's because you're talking about a store, so like that will sell at Nordstrom.
Right.
But like the verb sell is a little confusing there. So it conflicts in my head. So I'd say take extra care of the language around the subject line and first line, similar to the last email, but like specifically the subject line is critical here.
So think critically on your subject line.
Yep.
And then I would say simplify value prop and illuminate pain.
Yeah.
Really what you're trying to do. You know, they confused the value prop too much and they didn't really dig into the pain very well of what they would be experiencing right now in this very unique situation that we all find ourselves in.
Right. Good stuff. Thanks. So now we're going to be moving on to kind of just an invite. So some of you on the call today have actually submitted your work and you're actually watching us review it live. But for those that have not submitted their work yet to be reviewed by the panel, we do offer this opportunity once every 2 weeks on sequence practice. So please go to revup90.com/submissions to submit your cold emails, phone calls, phone scripts, and sequences. Thank you.
Do it up.
And now we're heading on to our very first sales sequence of the day. So without further ado, so this is for a lead generation company that they have not yet sent this sequence out. So they're just starting to do this. And they're trying to get affiliate program managers to use their service.
This is hard. I'm kind of excited for this one. This is hard, man. There's a lot of lead gen. I probably get 6 lead gen companies a day reaching out to me, literally. So knowing that, I'm not even going to read this.
Yeah.
Knowing that the stakes it's even more saturated than you would look at a normal sales sequence. You have to get even more creative. I would lean like so far to the creative aspect that you might even like be wary of like pissing a few off, but you have to stand out. Like you have to stand out big time. But anyway, that's my preface to this whole thing.
Yeah, I get that there's an assumption in this email that we all can agree to if we know who the sender is. But if we don't know the sender, there's an assumption here that's really just not appropriate, which is I currently drive blah, blah, like, I don't know who you are. Like, what on earth are you talking? What is the problem that you're proposing to solve? Like driving leads, are you assuming I don't drive enough leads? Like what, especially because you're talking about affiliates, like what is this thing? What on earth are you trying to refer to? Because you're almost throwing out your credentials before we have any context for why we should care. So similar to previous email, like just like state, what is this problem that you're proposing to solve here? I would 100% double down on the idea of like, get really creative, drop the high. Like I get that, hey, we didn't separate it as another paragraph and make it, high paragraph, next sentence, but like, that's just not enough, right? Like, let's go a little bit further. Let's get edgy. I would totally agree, Scott. Like you're going to piss some people off, but let's do it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, so first thing, obviously, Rex, you're noticing that it's all about me. The first sentence is entirely, it's like flashing your credentials every time you meet somebody in networking, right? Here's my resume. Hey, Rex, here's my resume.
All of them do that. Yeah.
The only
so
sentence that isn't about me says they are compliant and exclusive. That's the only sentence that isn't about me.
Right. Yeah. Well, what do you think about I've been really successful?
I don't care. Honestly, I don't know who you are. So you're here to help me, and maybe you can tell me you're successful, and you can give me your NASCAR slide of all the people you've helped once you've earned my interest, right? You got to get my interest before I care about, any of your credentials. I think for this one, I would go very kind of persona-based messaging, which again, you can automate a lot of it if you do deep discovery on what your personas care about. But if I was reaching out to an account executive for this, I would just, again, try and start with maybe an illumination question. And it's like, hey, I'm a sales guy. We all love closing deals. Not all of us love prospecting all day. Do you fall in that camp too? Something like that. And then like, I don't love prospecting. Like that, it's not the best part of my job. And then maybe, I would probably add a piece of content to that of, hey, here's a cold calling checklist that makes sure you get it done or something. It's how I keep myself, accountable for it or something. And you're kind of like humanizing yourself because you're in a similar role. You're trying to be helpful, and you got to just, again, warm them up a little bit.
Right. And no, good point, Scott. There's one thing I wanted to point out as well on here. I don't know if I mentioned that this is actually a LinkedIn automated email.
I just caught that. Yeah, I just caught that right now.
So what's your thoughts on that, Rex?
Look, there's two schools of thought for this, and I've seen all of the studies that have come out on like whether this works and how it works. Like, I prefer either personalized to me, like, hey, I caught your episode of this podcast and really enjoyed it, thought we should connect. I will guarantee I will connect with you, or nothing at all. I do not like about the sender. Like it doesn't, like, look, I would connect with you if I find immediate value in exactly what you're describing, and I don't, so I'm not going to connect with you. I think the connection rate here is going to be pretty low, and the response rate, if they connect, is going to be even lower. I think it's just like, it's not enough of the right information, or it's too much of the wrong information, or both, for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it kind of speaks to what both of you were talking about earlier, is that when you automatically start by pitching what you do, you may get lucky and get that, 0.7% of people who already have that need and are looking for your service. But it doesn't really leave a nice taste in their mouth for the people, the other 99.3%, right? So if you're trying to make connections on LinkedIn, which is a networking platform, trying to talk about what you sell, you're not really encouraging people to want to actually be your friend, be connected with you and engage with you, right? You're basically saying like, hey, if you have this need, buy from me. If you don't, just completely ignore me and we'll never talk again.
Yeah, the assumption is if we connect, you're going to buy from me. And like, well, that's just way too much of an ask for me. So I'm just going to say decline.
Totally.
I didn't even notice it was a LinkedIn invite. Yeah, don't do this. There's no way to fix this. Don't do this at all. Don't do this. Honestly, thank you for submitting, but I really think it would be, don't do this. You're hurting your personal brand, and you're hurting your company's brand, I think, by doing this.
All right. So Scott just says, no. Just X.
Yeah. I mean, I like Rex said, send the blank invite and you'll get a better, response rate for sure. Or connect rate.
And like, you'll almost see it in the profile views, like who of those who accepted are interested in learning more about who you are and your product. Like, you'll probably see that traffic come to your website. You don't have to do anything, because connecting is just that like spark of interest. And if they're interested, they'll go further. And if they're not, okay. I would say send the blank invite. The other thing would be like, look, you're talking about driving leads, major ad platforms. Like, I don't know. I think there's almost, if you're going to send an automated connection request, I would almost play it on the nose and say like, hey, Susan, yes, this is automation, but automation is what drives 2,500 or 2,500 leads per week for my customers. Thought you'd be interested in seeing it. Like, I don't know. I would just point at it and call it out and say like, look, if this is a tactic I use on major ad platforms, then like, I'm just going to point it out. Let's discuss it instead of assuming that you're going to buy from me because of this. I'd at least like to highlight that. But again, I'd send a freaking blank invite at this point. Like, I think you'd just be better off.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and then that leads to make sure your LinkedIn profile is optimized and doesn't come across too salesy or spammy or anything. Like, make yourself an interesting person who has some personality. And if I can't go quickly, Because if I quickly go to your thing and it's still this kind of language, then I might think twice. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks to both of you for that. We're going to move on to the next one, but before we do, we have a question from the audience. So the question is, using videos to introduce yourself, do you start with "I am Jeff at RevUp," or do you start with something specific to the customer that you identified?
It's a great question, Beth. I've got my 2 cents. I've done a lot of video in the past. We adopted Vidyard back in the day, like 4 years ago, I think. So like pretty, and we played around with this a lot. I would do super quickly, because people can't, I wouldn't say "I am blank with blank." I used to just be like, "Hey, Scott Barker here," and then get right into it, right into it. I think there's a weird thing with video that people do kind of want to know who they're speaking with a little bit. But that's my 2 cents. Hey, Scott Barker here. Hey, Beth Rosenberg here. And then dive into the pain. That's my 2 cents. I haven't sent outbound videos in a while though, so worth an A/B test.
Yeah.
Rex, do you use video in your?
I love video. We actually have, so we just established our OKRs for my sales team for Q4 here. And one of them is to send at least 2 videos a day. Like, we just want to add more video because it stands out. It's a great way to leverage the email channel. It's just more value you can create there. I think it's way interesting. I get a lot of email pitches, but I don't get a lot of video pitches. So I can tell you, like, someone's probably going to give it a listen. Look, if you set up your email signature and they can see your email as it comes in, like, I don't really think it's necessary to point to yourself immediately or at all, frankly, but depends on the context of the email. If you literally sent like a pretty blank email, and like it was just like, "Hey, Beth, wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you," and then the video, like, yeah, I might introduce myself. But if there's more context, like, "Hey, Beth, wanted to point out a couple of things, found these, the video highlights it, check it out below." Like, if I'm going to give a little more richness there, then like just skip ahead. You're already halfway into the body of what you were trying to state anyway. So there's really no point in bringing it up, because it's like there's a disconnect there, as if you started the conversation over. So I'd say less context. Yeah, introduce yourself. That's okay. I think people do want to hear, who you are. But if you've already given a paragraph or 2 ahead of the video, like, just jump straight into the point, because you're just punctuating something in a really cool way instead.
Perfect.
Totally. And super quick, Jeff, on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a great point. So one of my other favorite so I was talking about, if it was a first touch cold video, my favorite thing to do used to be, it would be a second touch, and it would be drawing the connection, something like, "Hey, I'm the goofy guy that just sent you that funny email," right? That is a really good way to start it. It ties back into it. And it kind of makes it relevant, and usually catches them. That's one. So yeah, making it relevant.
Oh, thanks. So Beth, I hope that answered your question. I see a thank you, so you're totally welcome. So now for the next email. So this is an automated email. This is step 3 of the sequence on day 1. So he's doing a triple touch right to start.
What was step 2? So this is a LinkedIn connection request.
LinkedIn connection request, phone call, and an email.
I personally love to use phone call first, because I would love to have a live conversation. I would swap those, because if I have a live conversation, I'm going to go ahead and connect with you on LinkedIn anyway, because that's a good way to like stay in touch.
Yeah.
But if I have that first phone call turns into a conversation, like, I don't care about the LinkedIn Connect coming first. And in fact, just so like we're clear, a lot of sales reps will avoid the call because they're like, "Oh, I have all these LinkedIn tasks to get through."
Right.
They don't use the task queues correctly in Outreach or Sales Offer, whatever they're using. Like, "Oh, I got to do all these LinkedIn tasks first. Like, I'll get to calls tomorrow." And in reality, like, just go earn a few conversations and then go backfill your time in your least productive hours with those connection requests. So I always say, like, throw the call out first. This is my 2 cents on how to organize the triple tap.
Yeah.
Which I'm good with, by the way. Like, sure, if you want to do that, by all means, but I'd say throw in phone call first.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point too, because I have noticed that a lot of people tend to put the call last, and then by putting the call last, that ends up being maybe not at all. So you end up just having a bunch of automated steps as opposed to the actual phone call, which, to your point, seems to get a pretty good yield these days, because everybody's really focusing on their automated tasks.
Sure. Yeah.
Scott, what do you think?
Phone calls work. I probably answer 1 out of 2 cold calls. And I certainly don't answer 1 out of 2 cold emails. Probably 1 out of 200.
Yep.
Right on.
So some of the things will kind of be redundant that we've talked about here. So I like the personalized sentence. Hopefully they're making it very them-centric. I saw something on LinkedIn you did or something. I like the first personalized sentence, maybe giving your team a little more parameters around like what you want that personalized sentence to be. Like if I was just making this for my team. And then we see a lot of we language again. This is what we've done. Look at us. We've helped all these people. We made this happen by doing this. Again, reiterating, let's illuminate a problem first. You know, you could even put, we've identified company as a perfect client. Don't use the word client because you are rapidly growing in which have a largely untapped market. Make that sentence better and then put that up at the top, I would say, you know, like your reason for reaching out, or, you know, our team saw, like, and be more specific. What is the untapped market that you identified, if that's actually true, or you're just kind of using buzzwords. Can we talk about a customized partnership this week? Those ones are always funny when people try and say they want to partner with you, but they're trying to sell you something.
The euphemism.
You know,
yeah.
yeah.
Don't be afraid of the word sales, but
yeah,
don't throw it out so early in the relationship. Yeah.
I don't know if that was coherent, but it was largely just reiterating some of the things that we've already touched on here.
Well, Scott, I like your idea of like that third paragraph. Like, if there is something actually true about this, like, so we're basing this on the assumption that you have actually accurately targeted the right people. Assuming that that's true, we're just going to assume the best of the submission here. Put that as the first paragraph, but like, hey, it looks like you're growing rapidly in these states. We think there's a huge untapped market there, and have been able to drive qualified leads at the golden ratio 4-to-1, or whatever you like make up a term for it. I don't know, you know, like make something interesting there, sound unique. Do you guys already have a partner who handles that for you in those territories? Like just get them to respond, right? Again, just kind of reiterating those points again. But I think, yeah, flip that third paragraph up to the top, make it a little cleaner. You're good to go. You've got the credentials, but you don't even need to drop like the Inc. 500, which, by the way, is it Fortune 500, Inc. 5000? Who cares about the Inc. 500? Is that like a subset of the Inc. 5000? I think there's like a little bit of a disconnect there. Something.
Yeah. No, good points on all around. It's funny, Rex, this brings back your conversation about states earlier, about location. You know, this is actually, with the email you just described, that's a very elegant way to use the location-based personalization you were talking about.
Yeah, and if you think there really is an untapped market there, great. If you don't say that. Like, please don't use misinformation, or, you know, like pretend that you think something is true, or that you're like, just don't lie. It's not worth it. You could be smarter about your targeting, and you'll probably have a much higher success rate here.
Right. And well, I mean, and that's a couple things there about integrity as well. When you're talking about a customized partnership, when people see right through it, which a lot of people do, it does speak to your integrity, and people don't want to do business with people they don't trust.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens if the CRO gets on the call and it's like, oh, tell me about this untapped market that you have identified. How did you identify it? We've been trying to identify and quantify that for ages. Like, and if it's not there, you're in some serious trouble.
Oh man, that's such a good point too, because imagine if this is a specialized sales process and we have an SDR who sent out this email, and the poor AE who shows up to that call. That poor sucker is going to think that they're just about to feature dump or like tell a really cool story, and it doesn't connect at all to the reason the person showed up to the call. And then you get that like, hey, why wasn't that qualified? You know, the SDR comes up after the call, like, hey, why wasn't that qualified? I thought it was a great lead. Like, yeah, they thought they were coming in for a customized partnership. So when I started showing them our deck, it didn't make any sense. Like, that disconnect just is going to kill your sales process. You know, you got the demo, be darned. Like, it's just not going to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Good points. So we'll go on to the next one. So this is actually step 7. So just for context, again, this is about a 12 touch sequence. So this is step 7 on day 8. The purpose of it is to book a call, and it's an automated email.
All right. I'm a stickler for subject lines and capitalization here. Don't capitalize need.
Okay.
You're either starting a sentence or you're not. Let's see. I think you've highlighted some vagueness here. I think you're in charge, parentheses, or other metric. That's interesting. Like, why don't you just tell me?
Right.
Like, are you asking if they're in charge? What is the point? Like, if you think they're in charge, why are you asking them for a meeting until you've confirmed that they're in charge of it? It's kind of a disconnect there.
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of I think you are. I'm much more inclined to say, well, if you think, why are you reaching out to me? Just reach out to me when you know who I am and what I do.
Yeah, do your research. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the second paragraph is just kind of it's too much. We won in the Western states in blank. Seriously, we did. That's a weird thing that people who say trust me, you probably shouldn't trust. We pushed our California client into the ink with our lead round. I'm really proud of this. Like that's awesome. And you can be very proud of that, but I don't think you need to highlight that. Again, staying away from I language is so unbelievably important.
Yeah, it's the why should I care? I get this cold email out of nowhere. Why should I care that you're really proud of all the success you have?
Sounds a little bit like a call to my mom. Like, hey, mom, like, we won huge in the Western states. Like, seriously, we did. Like, your mom just doesn't have the faith in you that you could be successful. Like, Rex, I told you you'd never succeed at sales. Like, I'm really proud of this. Like, come on, mom. Like, it just doesn't fit, right? It doesn't have the right vibe. It's not professional.
Right. Sorry, as a side note, we have another question from the audience. So I noticed best practice subject lines don't capitalize at all. Do you know why?
I think it's just different. I'm sure the pendulum will swing once everyone starts doing that. You know, we always just play this game of kind of best practice tennis, where as soon as everyone adopts something, so everyone just did titles with capitals, and then everyone started doing best as a best practice, it not capitalized because it was just different and it stands out. But I'm sure maybe separating things with dots will soon become a best practice. Who knows?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a controversial point of view on like the term best practices in general. So like the idea of a best practice that is universally applicable is a total falsehood. Like that's just like there's no way that you can guarantee me that for an engineer in South Dakota at a 5,000 person company, I'm going to send the same type of subject line as to the CEO of Fortune 500. It's they're not even close to the same audience, and so best practices are relative to your audience and your offer. So I would say, don't assume that because someone wrote about it. I used to I love HubSpot, right? I use HubSpot all the time, but I used to call out HubSpot as like they were the source that everybody went to for all those articles that said generated $2 million in pipeline with one cold email, and then everybody went and copied it, right? Yeah. So like that's considered a best practice. If you learn that everybody's not capitalizing their subject line, A/B test it. If you're not using something like an outreach, again, I swear I'm like running a commercial for outreach here, but like this is the kind of technology you need to use. Just run an A/B test.
Right.
If you find that that's true, then that's your best practice and absolutely run with it. I think Scott's absolutely right though. It's like, hey, we're used to the capitals. Now we're doing no capitals. And then eventually everybody will get used to the no capitals and we'll go back to capitals or do something weird. We'll use more emojis. I remember there was a big question around that like a year ago. Should I use emojis in my subject line? It depends on your audience. I mean, some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. Depends on your brand voice. So there's a few things in there. But like in general, I'm just, as much as we're talking about best practices for emails, it's more about best practices for sales. Like how do you have a good sales conversation over an email? Right. And I think the like subject line, little nitty gritty stuff really depends on your audience. So please test it. That would be my recommendation.
Right. Thank you. So test.
I got a controversial statement on my newsletter landing page that says, by the time it becomes a best practice, it no longer works. And so we're giving you best practices now, but this is why we do it every 2 weeks, because in 2 weeks it could be completely different. So you constantly evolve and test and iterate.
So why don't we just replace the word best practice? How about we just say things that work today?
Yeah, current practice. Yeah.
Things that work today, because tomorrow is different. Yesterday was different. Let's talk about what works today.
Yeah.
So we're running low on time here. So I'm just going to show this real quick. So this is steps 11 and 12 on day 12. So it's a LinkedIn and an email automated.
So 11 is at the top.
Yeah.
It's kind of odd. It seems like the two steps. So here's a point I'll say. So your sequences are building blocks off of one another, right? You're telling kind of a complete story with them.
Yeah.
When I read both of these, it's as if you didn't just send me that other email. You know,
Yeah. So it's assuming that they're not seeing both of these. It's assuming they're only looking at one of the other.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would imagine you should have your emails threaded. You know, if you're using a sales engagement tool, you can even do that, you know, manually. I would suggest having them threaded so they can like see all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say these look very disjointed.
I'm going to call this out, not because I think there was anything wrong with it when it originally came out, but like similar to the concept of best practices going out of style. Like, I won't say that it was like only Aaron Ross, but Aaron Ross popularized the idea of like, let's ask, like, who's the right person? Ask for a referral. Not a bad strategy. I think it's worked very well in the past. But there is a little bit of like sales laziness here. Like, look, why don't you just say, hey, look, research two contacts, the person you think is definitely like your primary, and like find a secondary and say, hey, Susan, you know, you might not have been the person to send all this to. If so, I apologize. Would you recommend I talk to Jim or someone else? Like, just ask and be specific. You can do that in a sequence. You can drop in like secondary contact name or add them as a field on that actual contact record. Say, here's the name of the secondary contact. And I would just ask, because you're more likely to get a response. And it also seems way less lazy. Like, hi, I decided to email you, so you owe me something. You're probably not going to get any responses at all out of that. You're going to get massively ignored.
Yeah, good points. Good points. With all that said, this is the sequence. So just for your reference, probably should have put this at the front, sorry. But this is the actual sequence of steps. So we haven't really reviewed anything like this in sequence practice before, but I thought it was a good addition to kind of give context. Do either of you see anything, so besides the call step being 1 Rex, is there anything else that you see on here that you would adjust?
They seem to be aligning email and LinkedIn here on steps 4 and 5. I don't really know that you need to do that. I mean, you already did a triple tap the first day.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think I would double tap them the next time around. I think you'd spread that out. What is step 5 like a personalized message or something? I know we didn't get to dig into step 5.
It's an automated message. It's not really much personalization.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I would have offered a lower level touch in step 5 and just said like, go like something that they shared or comment on something that they commented on, or do just a little bit lower level of engagement, because it does seem a little bit like desperate to always hit them with so many different channels, and probably a very similar automated message in steps 4 and 5 based on what we saw in those last 2 steps we reviewed.
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah. Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you. So with that said, looking at this sequence, what are 3 kind of key takeaways the audience can take away from this conversation?
From the sequence as a whole, you're thinking?
Yeah, just from the sequence as a whole. What are the 3 things that stand out in your mind that this person should know?
It's hard. We threw out a lot of advice here, Scott. There was a lot. I would, you know, I would say like one is back to the drawing board, really. I think I would probably most of these touches need work. So I would probably just try and start this again, or at least A/B test with a completely new sequence based on some of the feedback that we gave.
So always be testing is one thing. Another thing that came up through a number of these sections was the honesty, like the integrity.
Which, by the way, like especially related to the industry of lead generation, is probably like the biggest number one concern. So addressing that straight up, you've either got to hit it on the nose and say like, we know this is an issue and here's how we're addressing it, or just stay away from anything that could possibly be conceived as shady. So honest and direct, 100%.
Right on. And I think I'm going to point out one that you had, Rex, phone first.
Yeah.
You know, use phone first. And it's a different way of thinking. We talked about the reasons why. It's really difficult when you're trying to reach out to 20 to 50 people a day or 100 people a day to actually have time to phone. But phone is so effective when everybody else is using automated emails and automated messaging tools. Phone does get results, depending on your audience, I guess I should say.
I'll sneak one more in there. We'll do bonus.
Sure.
Is make your target the hero, right? Don't say I'm so proud of myself. Say you're so proud. Find ways to be proud of your prospect, on what they've done and the challenges they face and overcome. You don't ever want to be the hero of your own sequence.
Right. Good point.
Unless you're sending a sequence to your mom, which I'm fully on board with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that is pretty much it for today, for our time for today. So thank you, Rex and Scott, for joining me. And thanks for everybody who joined on as a attendee and for your comments and your questions. We really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about this topic, go to revup90.com/sequence practice, and you can join in even for the next event.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, everyone. That was a lot of fun.
Hey, guys.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye, guys.